Hi, everybody. I'm really excited about this panel. So I want to introduce this as basically Golden Gate Bird Alliance, where this is like our first step into having an impact in this space and helping be part of the solution with the issue of cats and wildlife. And so I our conservation committees in the past have actually done a lot of work on this issue, advocating with vets clinics, for example, to have them to speak to their clients about keeping cats indoors for the safety of the cat. But in the last 5, 6, 7 years, we haven't really done anything in this space. And so I started exploring who's out there. Already being part of the solution, and that's these folks. So I wanted to start our kind of exploration of what Golden Gate Bird Alliance can do with the solutions that folks have been working on. I want to quickly say that I know this is a very it can be a controversial topic, and we encourage you to use the chat for comments and questions, and we'll get to questions after all the panelists have spoken. But I just want to remind everybody we invited these speakers here to share their knowledge and expertise with us. And so I'm super grateful that they're here. And so I encourage you to hold that gratitude with yourself as you write your comments and questions. And hopefully we can have a really engaging discussion and questions that are still respectful of all of our speakers and their different perspectives on this topic. So with that, I'm just going to kick it right off to our first speaker. I'm going to introduce, we have Tyus Williams here. He is a fifth-year PhD candidate and NSF fellow at UC Berkeley in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management. His research focuses on looking at how characteristics of urban environments potentially exacerbate the ecological impacts of free-roaming domestic cats and that they have on native wildlife communities. As a passionate science communicator, he is also the author of the Kirkus-starred children's book, A Day in the Life, Big Cats, and is expecting his second publication in September. We're so happy to have you here. Welcome, Tyus, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks everybody for all of your participation. So I'm going to jump straight into it. Let's see. You guys should be able to see that. Should
Yes.
be good to go. I meeting controls. Let's go slideshow, play from start. Okay. All right. I think you guys should be able to see me. Oh,
Yep.
show
Everything looks
video. Okay.
great. Yep.
All right, cool. Great. Okay, well, thanks again for having me, Whitney. Thanks for organizing this. Glenn, thanks for also participating. Well, not participating. Thank you for also your organization of this, and thank you for inviting me. And a hello to Natalie. I know that you're in the. I can see you, but I can't see your face. So we work together on many things, and so hopefully that you're doing well. I just got back from seeing the Odyssey. If you guys have not seen it, go see it. It's a great Greek epic. If you didn't read it in high school. But let's get into some more realistic terrestrial organisms in the world of our fabric of our reality and talk about domestic cats. And so this is me covering a little bit, 15 minutes of some of the research that I did regarding my first chapter of the manuscript that I did here at UC Berkeley. And this is a little bit about just like how peripheral urban environments influence temporal and detection patterns of free roaming cats. And I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I have labored over and invested my time in trying to understand more about these really fascinating animals that are one of the most popular companion pets around the globe. Let's see. And so I just want to take a moment for us to all just think about where we're sitting. We all probably live, and especially current literature suggests, even from the United Nations reports on human population growth, going back to 2011, but even more recent literature showing that over 50% of human society as a population, as a civilization, is generally found in cities and metropolitan environments. And that's going to become even significantly more so over the growing years as we're expecting it for especially by 2030 to see a significant growth in our population in urban metropolitan environments. I wanted to kind of leave us with start with this statement of being like, think about where you are. All of us to some degree are probably in some urban environment or in a metropolitan space, have lived in a city, or maybe were born in a city. And the idea is that cities are an epicenter for a tremendous amount of activity, teeming with not only human life, but also the wildlife communities that inhabit these places. And I say that because this is especially highlighted in a publication by Aronson et al. 2014. It's a fascinating paper on the Royal Society B, where they observed in an analysis of 54 cities that nearly a third contain globally threatened bird species, suggesting that cities may function as vital sanctuaries for biodiversity. And and the reason why this is interesting is because while we understand that cities have a mass amount of sprawl and can also contain biodiversity, there's also an issue with this in the continuum of how we look at global biodiversity conservation, because a threat can also be right in front of us in plain sight, where we might not even realize it. Because of human disturbance and the range of our movement, cities can also provide refuge for non-native species where we may facilitate their dispersal, presenting threats to urban biodiversity. In many cases, these aren't typical nuisance species. You may think of like pigeons or maybe like the black rat, which is also an invasive species that was introduced from Asia, iconic for the bubonic plague and the devastation when it comes to human health issues around the world. But in some circumstances, it's a widespread companion animal inextricable to human society that we might not think of. In this circumstance, it's the domestic cat. The domestic cat, scientific name Felis catus, is one of the most impactful non-native species worldwide, directly compromising biodiversity conservation efforts and public health. And just to give you some basic stats, to look at the ecological influence of domestic cats, they're responsible for the extinction of 63 vertebrate species. In the US alone, free roaming cats kill 1.3 to 4 billion wild birds and 6.3 to 22.3 billion wild mammals annually. They've also been introduced to 5% of all island systems. I believe there are over what is it? I think there are over I believe if you do the math on the number of island systems, I believe they've been introduced to I think it's over 5,000 different island systems. I think over the 85,000 islands that I think exist around the globe, if I'm getting that number right. And that has occurred over the last 2,000 years, I believe, which is it is significant expansion, probably one of the most productive expansions and dispersals of a species that we have ever known historically when we think about it, due to human contact with islands and obviously colonialism as well. If you think about how they get to some of those remote places, and it leads me to kind of really suggest this really pressing question when I wonder, what if one of our most beloved companions is also one of our greatest threats to biodiversity? And I recognize, as Whitney really iterated, that this is a sensitive topic. And I take no joy in the pleasure of potentially leaning on the idea that this is something of merit, but it's something worth tackling fundamentally at the core, which lead me to kind of tackling some of this research on my own and hopefully facilitating and stimulating a larger discussion around it. And so, in terms of addressing the research gaps in domestic cat ecology, there's actually a lot of research regarding domestic cat ecology. But the interesting thing about it is that cat ecology is in human-dominated environments is well studied, highlighting that cat abundance and activity are often informed by human influence. But what makes cats so unique compared to other non-native species is their relationship to people. And what's fascinating about that is out of the 50,000 species, non-native species that exist in the US, I believe over 4,000 of those are considered truly invasive. And the domestic cat is the only species that we directly supplement their lifestyle out of the 4,000 plus something invasive species that exist in the US. And it's a fascinating conversation because that means it's a unique ecology that requires unique solutions. And so something often overlooked in domestic cat studies is how social and ecological factors in combination inform the behavior of free roaming cats across space and time. And so what I find is that ecological factors alone are potentially insufficient in determining the spatial temporal ecology of cats and require more societal qualities that might inform observed patterns. So here's kind of where I dive into this. And to get into some of the research questions, hypotheses, just briefly, using wildlife cameras to assess how socio-ecological factors correspond with spatial and temporal ecology, we ask two specific questions. We're interested in how do the socio-ecological features of urban landscapes influence the detection events of domestic cats? And how do socio-ecological features influence the temporal activity patterns of free-roaming cats? And so what we anticipated is we determined that cat detections would increase at regional shorelines, the places where I was sampling and putting up camera traps, closer to residential areas with greater population density, lower median income and higher vegetation cover. And then I found that for temporal patterns, we predicted that cat nocturnality would increase at shorelines closer to residential areas with greater median income, vegetation cover, and dense human populations. And so these are kind of the proxies in proxy to what I understood about cat ecology literature. I was interested in trying to see in how this temporal and spatial dynamic potentially would change in this really interesting urban natural peripheral boundary that people often navigate on a daily basis, and cats might as well too. And so, really briefly, so we surveyed 10 regional shoreline park locations managed by the East Bay Regional Parks District. Shout out to the East Bay Regional Parks District. They were super helpful in the development of this project. And the survey period extended from April 5th, 2022 to December 11th, 2022 for 250 days, giving us about 4,900 camera trap nights. And so there are about 4,900 trap nights across the shoreline sites with a mean sampling effort about 240.3 days per camera. We captured a total of 691 detections of domestic cats on 23 of our 26 cameras with a range of 1 to 99 detections per shoreline site. And then we also looked at the time of the day because we get a time date stamp. And the mean hour of detection for domestic cats observed across shoreline parks was about 0.39 hours. And what you have to do is you convert it in from radians to circular time. And so it's in radians. And so then we change it to circular time. So we get about somewhere around 12:23, like, like in the morning or so. So meaning kind of really expressing the idea that cats usually are pretty active at night, as we can imagine. And so was just briefly touching on this. We don't really have to get into how I selected my variables. And so we took a whole bunch of covariates looking at like, impervious surface area. We looked at road density. We looked at traffic mean. We looked at housing density, population density, income, green space, how green an area is, which is NDVI, and temperature. And we compiled all of these variables, and then we ran this in a looking at the collinearity between the two to see how much they inform each other or what should be removed from the analysis. And after doing this, our final predictive variables for further modeling were looking at, we took nearest housing distance, which essentially is the idea of like how close a camera is to the nearest home in a residential area. We looked at population density by square kilometers. We looked at median income, and then we looked at like NDVI, which essentially tells us how green the landscape is, because green plants reflect infrared or absorb red light and reflect infrared light, which is how you can measure that using NDVI calculations, which is super cool. And so just like jumping into some of the results that I got. And so we compiled several models using GLMN models to basically get an idea of like what is the best model for us based on these various questions that we're trying to ask. And we figured out that our urban model containing the variables nearest housing distance and population density was the top ranked model, which is basically saying that like out of the covariates that you're testing for, whether you're looking at an urban model, whether you're looking at an environmental model, whether you're looking at like an income model, your urban model is the best one. And so what we found was that housing distance was negatively associated with cat detections, and the only variable with a p-value less than 0.05. And then no other predictor variables were associated with cat detection. So what we see here in this graph is that as housing distance increases, we see that the number of detections decrease also in association in suit. And that kind of makes sense because a brief explanation of this basically is the idea that the greater a house is from a natural area, the more landscape resistance there is, the more danger there is, the more environmental exposure. You're essentially rolling a dice every single time you leave the house as a cat, and the possibility of also too like roadside vehicle collision as well. So it makes sense. The furthest house away from some of our sites was 2 kilometers, and the closest house in for one of our cameras was like 50 meters. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of environmental barriers to permeate into a natural area when you have a lot of ground to cover. So that actually makes a lot of sense. And then what we also did is we took a Bayesian model and we took all of this temporal data and then we compiled it with these same variables of interest. And then I was interested in seeing, okay, but what is their selection or behavior of time look like in these urban environments? And what we found is that the relative selection for these observed dial period categories was quite unique. And what we found is that temporal responses for environmental conditions were only significant for housing proximity and vegetation cover. What we found is that fur-roaming domestic cats did not avoid, but rather selected for crepuscular and nocturnal hours in areas with greater housing proximity and vegetation cover. And we found that other covariates such as median income and population density were not significant, and we found no evidence of selective avoidance as well when it came to those areas, which I think is really interesting, and we can talk about that towards the end. And we also looked at the variation of temporal activity as well, and we found from our analysis that domestic cats on average were more likely to be nocturnal across most of the shoreline parks we surveyed, except for Hayward Regional Shoreline in Point Isabel shoreline. As you can see that you see most of these dots, we're using a likelihood of selection based on, like I believe, median estimates. We see that most of the purple dots are towards nocturnal or towards nocturnality, except for a couple. You see that the red is for day for Point Isabel in Hayward Regional Shoreline, showing that there's a greater likelihood of selection of these cats selecting for these areas, which means that also the site that these cats are inhabiting can influence the temporality or potential selection of activity when it comes to time of day as well, which is really interesting because we have to treat cats as their own unique individual behavior as well, which is really makes the situation significantly more complex. And so while nocturnality was the dominant temporal pattern, we observed that cats exhibited some considerable variation in dial activity across all of the individual sampling sites as well, which is, I think, important to take away from this. And so, in the larger conclusion, to kind of go back to the temporality, or kind of like the selection of time periods, is what my advisor and I kind of figured out, that there's this whole cat temporal oscillation effect likely happening. What we think is happening is that cats migrate back into residential areas during dawn and dusk to receive human supplied food subsidies and protection from local predators. And then during the night, cats enter nearby natural areas during nocturnal hours when people are absent to potentially access prey resources. And I remember when we were we were looking at this data and we were trying to extrapolate a conclusion from this. I remember just like sitting with my advisor, I was like, why specifically select for a crepuscular period, the twilight periods, dawn and dusk in residential areas? And I was like, what is a predator that's also crepuscular? And I was like, coyotes. And so what's likely happening here is we should give more credit that cats deserve, that they're really smart and that they're likely taking advantage of human proximity to these natural areas as a buffer, or what we refer to as an ecology, the human shield effect. There's a lot of literature that shows this idea that small prey animals, or even small medium-sized mammals, will utilize proximity or inhabit urban, residential, or human-dominated landscapes as essentially as kind of like a shield, right? As a shield against large predators, because they know that large predators are typically deterred by human activity and human presence, which is really smart. And so what it's showing is that cats are taking advantage of their proximity and companion in being in association with us to also maximize the likelihood of food resources on different axes. They're going into natural areas and they're accessing food subsidies of natural origins, but they're also coming back into these residential areas and getting supplemented even further, anthropogenic human food subsidies as well. And it just shows that cats are really clever. We have to I think, more broadly about the fact that cats also are taking advantage of human resources in urban environments in ways that a lot of other wild organisms are as well, which I think is a really interesting ecology that shows that cats have a really unique domestic ecology that I think is worth, investigating even further. Whitney, I'm not really sure how I am on time. I know that I was like that was a one breath. I'm just now breathing again after that entire thing.
Yeah, that was
But
you do have actually a few more minutes actually. So yeah.
Okay, sure. And so I guess what I will take away from this. Let me see if I have any more slides. So I just want to leave this slide because I know I have just to say, just want to say thanks to everybody in East Bay Regional Parks. I just want to acknowledge the Hoverbrook Research Foundation. I want to acknowledge Critical Ecology Lab, Cal, East Bay Regional Parks, NSF, Shell Lab, anybody, all these people who have been involved and have participated in my research. This is me arguing with people online about domestic cats. I always say, like, domestic cats are not native to North America. People think that they're native to North America. Domestic cats trace their origin actually all the way back to Africa, specifically Northern Africa, the Near East region. You think of like the Fertile Crescent. Some parts of like the Near East region could be parts of the Middle East. About a little bit of 8,500 years ago, they split off from their nearest ancestor about 10,000 years ago, and they were domesticated in that area. So I always explain to people, they're always like, oh, well, cats are a part of the ecosystem. I'm always like, well, cats actually aren't even supposed to be here to begin with. Like, they're not even from North America. We have plenty of wild felids here. I was like, but domestic cats, unfortunately, are not one of them. But overall, I wanted to say that there's so much work to be done about domestic cats. They're such a fascinating animal, mercurial, charismatic, and obviously really interesting in the nature of being probably one of the most popular companion pets, but also being incredibly solitary, which I think informs a really unique way in which we tackle the problems and try to come up with really cutting edge solutions to solve the problem of not only the welfare for wildlife species, but also the welfare for one of our most beloved companion pets as well. This is coming from somebody who's like allergic to cats, you know, and the reality is that cats suffer greatly outdoors. And when they are unsupervised, we can only assume the worst when it comes to native wildlife and our furry friends as well. And so, with that, I just want to say to everybody, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If there's any slides you want me to go back to, I'm happy to do that as well. But I also just want to say thank you to Whitney Grover, and also thank you to Ryan Akano for the time that you guys have taken to engage in discourse and conversation about this really pressing issue that is both sensitive, controversial, and in many ways fascinating, and I think also to thrilling. I think to be a part of. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody, and thanks everyone to your for your time. And I'm happy to take any questions or let the next person take over the
Yeah,
slides.
yeah. So stick around, Tyus, and anybody who has any questions for Tyus or any of our speakers, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them after the speakers. That was awesome. I'm having a hard time keeping back my own questions too. So thank you so much, Tyus, for that introduction. Now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Natalie Reeder from East Bay Regional Park District. Natalie has worked for 2 decades on wildlife issues across the Bay Area, from researching disease ecology of Lyme disease to tracking endangered San Francisco garter snakes to now helping steward the 125,000 acres of land as a wildlife biologist with the East Bay Regional Park District. Natalie works on everything from salamanders to eagles and manages the park's free roaming cat program, working with an incredible community at the intersection of urban wildlife conservation and the cats and people who share their habitat. Uh, both cat welfare and the people who love them. So thank you so much, Natalie, for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Whitney. Hi, Tyus. Hi, Kate. I'm very privileged to get to work with all of you, Ryan and Glenn as well, on this issue and others. Let me share my slides. Here we go. And I actually have the same gorgeous cat that Ryan selected for the intro. So this very pretty cat at Hayward with a very great series of photos taken by an iNaturalist user who I've credited down on the bottom. So thank you for having me today. I'm here to talk about solutions for public lands, or at least the solutions that we are finding at the East Bay Regional Park District. And oops, not sure why it's going black. Oh, I was at the end. Excuse me. Here we go. So this is a pretty local group. I think you're probably all familiar with the East Bay Regional Park District and our over 73 parks and more than 125,000 acres sprinkled throughout Contra Costa and Alameda counties, and probably making up the majority of public open space in the East Bay. And all of that land is home to hundreds of species of animals, wildlife, native species, and plants as well. And it is a part of our mission to protect those animals. And on the shoreline in particular, we have threatened and endangered ground nesting birds and mammals that are extremely vulnerable. And so I'll be focusing on the shoreline today because these species are under such immense pressure. They've already lost over 95% of their native habitat. You can see on the left there, just the little bits of green are what's left of the historic marsh that's been converted for urban uses. And then what is left is under future threat from sea level rise. The shoreline is also where most of the people live. And as Tyus just detailed, where the people are is where the cats are. And we know that cats kill wildlife. So this is kind of an art photograph of all of the victims of cat attacks that died after being brought to Wild Care Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in San Rafael. And I think it was something like 321 animals were brought in and only 89 survived. So these are the ones that succumbed to the injuries inflicted by cats. But this is just one small wildlife rehabilitation facility in one pretty small city. and only the animals that people found and that lived long enough and were found by somebody who took the time to bring them into the center. So we know that cats kill a lot of wildlife, and also, as Tyus mentioned, I'm just giving the averages of the ranges that Tyus shared, but it's estimated that cats kill 2.4 billion birds and about 12.3 billion small mammals every year in just the United States. But we also can't look for solutions without acknowledging that special relationship that people have had with cats for thousands of years. People love cats. I love cats. So we really need to find solutions that work for wildlife, cats, and people if we're going to be successful. The East Bay Regional Park District has certainly learned that lesson on our own, and we've also seen lots of other efforts that have tried to ignore some of these relationships, and it just hasn't worked out very well. So it really is about welfare of all of those things, wildlife, cats, and people. So for cats, we don't consider our parks safe places for them. We have coyotes, we have off-leash dogs, we have busy roads nearby. So cats are exposed to injury, illness, and predation. Cats can also start getting pregnant at only 4 months old. And so one or two cats can turn into many cats very quickly. And we've had multiple instances where park users are upset by seeing cats that don't look well cared for in the parks. And it's upsetting to people, and we want people to have a positive experience when they go to the parks. We work a lot on proactive deterrence, so fencing sensitive areas, and we're working really hard to secure dumpsters and trash cans that cats can access food inside of. The amount of trash that people bring to our parks and leave there is pretty astounding, and it's quite a challenge to manage it all and keep it secure, but we're working on solutions for that. We are also really focused on outreach and education. We went and toured the Wildlife Rescue Sonoma County's, I think they call it the Coexistence Garden or Coexistence Farm. And they have this really incredible catio, for those who aren't familiar, a cat patio, where people can really see, and with this great informational sign, how their cats can be happy while not being fully outdoors. And we're looking at options to potentially create our own educational catio within the East Bay Regional Park District, where people can learn about responsible cat ownership that keeps their cats and wildlife safe at the same time. But the sort of bedrock of our program is our cooperation with animal services agencies. We work with pretty much every municipal animal services agency in the East Bay. And this work so far has been funded by the Regional Parks Foundation. And our process we call TNT, or trap, neuter, transfer. Many of you might be familiar with TNR, or trap, neuter, return, but we've already established that the parks are not safe places for the cats and that the cats are causing unacceptable harm to our wildlife. So we don't want to return the cats to those environments. So instead, we transfer the cats to our shelter partners where they're fixed, vaccinated, and evaluated. And depending on their socialization, they'll go to a different type of home. So we rely a lot on our park staff to help with trapping. And we've worked with Full Circle Cats multiple years to provide training to our staff on how to safely and appropriately trap cats and transfer them to the shelters. So big shout out to our partners, Full Circle Cats, and our community cat coordinators also in this picture, Tiffany Ashbaker, who is also, I'll talk a little bit more later about her role. And so cats are trapped, and if they are evaluated to not be socialized to people, they go into working cat adoptions where they are adopted by the adopter, but they continue to live outside, but they are vaccinated so they're not spreading disease. They are fixed so they're not having more kittens, and there's somebody looking out for them. So if they need some kind of medical care, they can be caught again and brought into the vet. If a cat is assessed to be friendly, or for kittens that can be socialized, they go into a normal pet adoption. Sorry, I just had a pop up here. Okay. And we are averaging transferring about 46 cats per year since the program really got going in 2021. And you can see here in this map, most of the activity is around the shoreline where more cats are and more people are, and where we have our really vulnerable ground nesting shoreline birds. And I just want to kind of wrap up with a story. We were contacted in last year by SFBBO, where they had some snowy plover nests that were just on the edge, the verge of hatching, and those four blue dots are those snowy plover nests. And then they were seeing this black and white cat hanging around the nests in very close proximity, like swiping distance of what were soon to be little cotton ball cat toy sized baby birds. So those black paw prints are where the cat was seen. So Tiffany, our community cat coordinator, and I went out to set traps and set up cameras, and we thought we were going to catch this cat right away because it just is not a very hospitable place. It ended up taking us several weeks to catch it. We kept getting it on camera. We caught a different black and white animal, but we did finally catch him. And this is Marshall shortly after he was captured. He was determined not to be socialized to people. So here he is a little later with his new colleague in their acclimation catio at their new adoptive home. And then also highlighting around the edges the partners that make this all possible. So Oakland Animal Services was Tiffany's employer at the time, and Hayward Animal Shelter provide the spay neuter, and we worked with SFBBO on observations. So it's really a collaborative effort, and I'm happy to say that all four of those nests, according to SFBBO's monitoring, hatched successfully. And while I can't say for sure that that cat would have eaten any of the chicks, we hopefully prevented that. And then even if the cat wouldn't have gone for them, removed some of that predation pressure that the birds would have been feeling and gave these chicks a better start in life. So as I mentioned, this is a huge collaborative community project. Our staff is vital. Tiffany Ashbaker has been an invaluable partner. Our animal services agencies really step up when they have very little resources to do so. And our community, so nonprofits like Full Circle Cats, and then also just volunteers and people who help us when they see cats in the parks. And so there are things that we can all do. You can become a working cat adopter if you have an appropriate home for that. And I put the link up to the application that goes to Tiffany there. Or if you know somebody, you can let them know about this program and tell them that they can adopt a cat. You can support your local shelter. They're constantly getting squeezed budget-wise, personnel-wise, and they really need the cities and municipalities who manage these shelters really need to know how important this is, not just to pet people, but to all of us as a whole community. And feel free to record cats that you see in our parks on iNaturalist. I do look at that to see what's going on in the parks and, of course, find beautiful pictures like this one. And that's all I have. So I know we're saving questions until the end, so I'll pass it back over to you, Whitney.
Thank you, Natalie. That was amazing. It's so great to see um, even small stories where some birds were protected. And then our next speaker, I also wanted to shout out. I see Tiffany in the audience, so thank you for being here tonight as well. And then our next speaker is Kate Wilson from the organization Full Circle Cats. And so, Kate, please take it away, introduce yourself, and share your presentation with us.
Okie dokie, let me get my screen share on. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so everybody can see my screen now, correct?
Yes, it looks
Okay.
great.
Perfect. Let me rearrange a few things on my end. Um, Okay, perfect. So, hello, welcome. First and foremost, thank you to Golden Gate Bird Alliance for having Full Circle here today. We're really excited to be here. Thank you to Tyus and to Natalie. And I am excited to talk to you guys about free roaming cats and the work that Full Circle Cats is doing. So, first and oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, my okay. Okay, good. So my name is Kate Wilson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the community cat program manager for Full Circle Cats. So Full Circle Cats, we are an all volunteer organization. We've been around for about, I think, 12, 13 years now. And our mission is we believe in improving the lives of cats and the communities that care for them through spay neuter adoption and education. So we have multiple programs. We have a foster and adoption program. Our foster program really focuses on some of the most vulnerable cats, like neonate kittens or cats with medical conditions. We provide community cat care through the form of spay neuter, sometimes also uh, we know cats get in fights, and so sometimes we need to see cats who need to have special surgeries after they've been fixed. And then we have education, our education component, which this speaker series, being invited to this workshop, is one of those things that we do. So Um, first, I want to get started. As Whitney talked about at the very beginning, I know this can be a sensitive and delicate topic, and so I just want to put out some undisputed facts that everybody in Full Circle agrees that free roaming cats do have a devastating impact on wildlife populations. That is 100% true. We also believe that the lives of wildlife and free roaming cats have value. And there is no perfect solution to the cat overpopulation crisis. But we may have more things in common than you initially thought. Our goal in Full Circle Cats is we want fewer free roaming cats on the street. Um, Fewer free roaming cats means it's going to be better for the cats. It's going to be better for the wildlife, and it's going to be better for the birds. So we have that shared common goal there. And we believe the really only effective way of reducing the number of free roaming cats is through TNR, or trap, neuter, and return. Um, Before I go into what exactly TNR is, what is a free roaming cat? You guys might have heard community cats, feral cats, stray cats, lots of different words. So when I'm talking about free roaming cats, I'm talking about three kind of types of cats. One, owned cats that have uninhibited access to the outdoors. So those are cats that are owned. They may or may not have collars. I saw some talk about that in the chat. But these are cats that can freely go in and out of their owners' homes. Um, Free roaming cats are also stray, lost, and abandoned pets. And the third component of that is community cats. These are kind of what you would typically think of as your feral cats. So what exactly is TNR? So TNR stands for trap, neuter, and return. It is the process of actually physically trapping a cat with a humane trap at their colony, taking them to a clinic to get neutered or spayed. They get vaccinated, they get medical care if they need it at that time, and then they are returned to their outdoor colony location. So Natalie talked about TNT, trap, neuter, transfer. We do trap, neuter, return. The cats are returned to the exact location that they were taken from. And so what are some benefits of TNR? So TNR, number one, it gradually reduces the population of cats at a colony, and it prevents more kittens from being born. I do want to stress that it is gradual. To actually see a reduction in the cats at a colony, you need to fix at least 75% of the cats there. And after fixing 75% of the cats, you'll start to see a decline over a 5-year period. You won't, anything less than 75%, you will not see a reduction in the cats. So we have a huge hurdle to face when we are talking about fixing all the cats at a colony. The benefits of TNR, it also reduces unwanted and nuisance behaviors like spraying, fighting, and roaming. We know that the farther the cats roam, the more wildlife they're going to encounter. So if we can prevent that roaming because the male cats don't have the sex drive anymore to go out and seek females, that is a positive. Um, the thing that I like the best about TNR is it immediately improves the life of the cat and the overall health of the colony. There are a lot of things that I wish that we could do for cats that live outdoors. And frankly, we just don't have enough resources. And what we can do is we can get them fixed, we can get them vaccinated, and we can get them medical care. So TNR is going to immediately improve the life of free roaming cats. And of course, it is also the humane alternative to catch and kill, which is exactly like what it sounds like. So have you seen a fixed community cat in your neighborhood? A sign of a fixed community cat would be a cat that has an ear tip or an ear notch. So this means that this cat is part, or at one time was part of a community cat colony. You will see also lots of the cats that you get from Oakland Animal Services, or you may adopt from Full Circle Cats. Already, they have ear tips as well, mostly because they probably got fixed as kittens. And once they were already fixed, we realized that they had the potential to be socialized. So next time you're driving around or you're walking in your neighborhood and you see a cat with an ear tip, now you know why. So I talked about the positives of TNR. So what are some alternatives to TNR? Because there's things that you can do besides that. So foster and adoption, that is a valid alternative. And that is something that Full Circle does participate in. We, whenever possible, remove friendly cats and kittens from colonies. A kitten socialization window is very, very short. It's really, you need to get a kitten inside and around people within the first 8 weeks of its life. You don't really start to see those kittens until they're 5 weeks old. So we really have a 3 week period to trap those kittens and bring them inside. But also our ability to foster these kittens and adult cats is really dependent on our capacity. Full Circle Cats is 100% volunteer organization. We do not have a physical location. All of the cats that we house are done so in our volunteers' homes. So if we can take a cat off the street is really dependent on our capacity. Shelters and rescues in the Bay Area are at or over capacity for the vast majority of the year. There is a kind of permanent kitten season in the Bay Area because of our mild weather. And so you'll find, throughout the whole entire year, shelters and rescues are at capacity. Um, Adoption alone will not solve the cat overpopulation crisis. There are way too many cats being born outside, and there's not a way to adopt all those cats into loving homes. And in addition, many cats will not thrive. Many cats that do thrive outdoors will not thrive indoors. And this is because community cats really exist on a spectrum of socialization. You may find the cats that you probably are not seeing are the fully unsocialized cats, the cats that only come out at night. They come out after all the other cats have gone away. They won't approach people. They won't look at you. They won't eat in front of you. These are your kind of fully unsocialized cats, and bringing those cats inside would be inhumane. Then I think kind of what we see more of are these cats that are a little bit more friendly. They are people adjacent. They are tolerant of touch. Some may be, they may be overly friendly when they're being fed, but just because that cat is friendly to its feeder or friendly when it's being fed does not mean that cat is going to have a positive experience if you bring it inside. Because remember, these cats, they're outdoors in their home. So they're comfortable out there. And if we remove them from their home, bring them inside, try to force them into adoption, many of them shut down and just do not thrive indoors. So another alternative is relocate. So that's also an alternative. My number one thing I say is, do you have a beautiful field where I can put feral cats who can frolic and be away from city streets and all this other kind of stuff? I don't have one. And so relocation is entirely resource dependent, and it requires careful planning and execution. And many of the problems that we're encountering now with free roaming cats, especially along our shorelines, are because cats were relocated without planning. These cats could have been dumped at these locations or abandoned there, and it really just exacerbates the problem there. So relocation is not a great alternative. There's also something called the vacuum effect, which is a phenomenon in which if you have a resource-rich area, and so for cats, I'm thinking, it's the Taco Bell on 35th in Oakland, if you're there. Their dumpsters are always open. I always see cats over there. There's a lot of shrubbery and bushes there. You have a lot of things that will attract the cats. If you remove the cats from that location and do not return them, you have this resource-rich area, and more cats from outside the area are going to go in there. Versus if we take the cats from that resource-rich area, we fix them, and we return them to their colony, there is not space for new cats to move in. So this is why returning the cats to the location that they came from is important. And again, let me just tell everybody again, trap, neuter, and return really is the only effective method of reducing the free roaming cat population. And I want to share a TNR success story with you guys. So this highlighted area is in San Leandro, close to the Bayfair Mall. And this back, I think in 2022, we Full Circle Cat volunteers, we fixed a total number of 106 cats from that location. I'll just go back again. It is just these, 6 blocks or so. So from these 6 blocks, we fixed 106 cats, and we removed 40 cats from that place. So 40 cats were adopted, mostly kittens, and 106 cats were fixed and stayed at the colony. All the pictures on this screen are cats from this colony. Shout out to my parents. They are on this webinar right now. And the cat in the lower left corner, the white cat there, they actually adopted 3 cats from this colony. And that is Spot there. So just quick shout out. So it was really through the work of a few dedicated volunteers that we were able to fix this many cats and get this many cats adopted. And as a result of doing this here at Bayfair, the colony, so this was in 2022, the colony population has been stable and no new kittens have been born. We are still in touch with the colony caretakers there, and they will call us if something happens. I have not received a call from them since the beginning of 2025. All the cats have been identified, and newcomers are easy to spot, and they get fixed right away. So it's easy in a sea of ear tips to know which cats don't have ear tips and get those cats fixed right away. And then also, we were initially brought to this colony because the cats there had really bad scabies and mange. And so through TNR, through getting them targeted relief for their scabies and mange, it cleared up. And the cats that were in need of additional medical care were treated. We have, I'll go back. This little white guy here in the corner on the right side is named Ghost, and he got a penectomy, which is he had sun damage and cancer on his ears, and he got those removed and released back out to his colony to live his beautiful, fun life there. So what is Full Circle Cats currently working on? We have a lot of things going. Very exciting. We have launched our own monthly spay neuter clinics with our partners, Island Cat Resources and Adoption. Spay neuter, there's no spay neuter in the city of Oakland. So we've launched a monthly pop-up clinic in Oakland to address this problem. Our volunteers are trapping at large colonies. We have partnerships with Waste Management, the transfer station that is in San Leandro, which also borders Oyster Bay, East Bay Regional Parks, and also the Oakland Coliseum complex. A lot of cats there, and we're trapping cats there. We're also transfer partners with area shelters for at-risk neonatal cats, kittens, and bottle babies. So these kittens are kittens who have been separated from their mother and need constant care. And so we bring those into our foster program because without these shelters being able to transfer them to us, they will most likely be euthanized. And My favorite part of everything is really being able to offer a variety of educational classes, lectures, talks like this. That is my favorite part of what Full Circle is currently doing. So, again, thank you. Thank you for Golden Gate Bird Alliance. And I look forward to being in dialogue and talking to everybody in a little bit. So,
Yeah, thank you, Kate, and thank you so much for all the work you do. Um, okay, so our final speaker, I don't see in the audience or the panel. Matt, if you're here in the audience hiding in there, please raise your hand, and I'll ask Ryan or Glenn for help here if you see a hand raised to promote that person. Um, but I'll just share. I hope that the audience can see that we're sort of doing this kind of like tiered scales of solutions for the cat issue, from public lands to neighborhoods. And then Matt is from the company Catopia, which is a catio company. And fortunately, both Kate and Natalie featured catios in their presentations a little bit. So it's an excellent solution for your home. So bringing it down to what you can do with your own cat. If you want to, there's actually a lot of different catio companies out there now, which is really cool. You can build your own. You can get one that is already prefabricated and less expensive, or you can go crazy and treat your cat to a custom catio. There's every scale of it. And then I think the other big solution for the cat that you own, your pet cat, that is socialized to be indoors, as Kate was saying, is just keep that cat inside, and that you're helping with the problem right there. That actually brings us to the first question. So I'm going to invite all the panelists to come back and share your faces with us. And the first question that was put into the chat had to do with the sort of distinction between pet cats, we'll call, and then what we traditionally think of as a feral cat or community cat, something that isn't owned by a single family or person. And so actually, I think all three of you kind of touched on this in your presentations, but maybe if somebody wants to take a stab at sort of like explaining why we don't necessarily need to draw the line there between those two groups.
so I'll speak to that. So really owned cats that have uninhibited access to outdoors, and also community cats, we really think about them as the same group, because we know access to spay neuter is a problem not just for community cats, but it's for owned cats as well. If you had a cat that gave birth in your backyard and you wanted to do the right thing, get the kittens adopted out, and get them fixed beforehand. If you were to go to a private vet, it's going to cost you anywhere from $700 to $1,000 per cat to get fixed. And we know cats can have a litter of 5 kittens. So I don't have $5,000 laying around. um, and so it's really unaffordable to fix cats. Even our reduced rates that the spay neuter clinics do of $300 per cat. That is still, when you're thinking of it in terms of a colony of cats or a mom cat and her kittens, it becomes really, really unaffordable. You also need to book those appointments at those clinics 2-3 months in advance. And so spay neuter is not just an issue for free roaming cats, it's an issue for owned cats as well.
Yeah. Anybody want to add to the answer?
I'll just say that in our experience, it's also really hard to tell. Tiffany will appreciate that you can have a cat that you trap and bring into the shelter. And maybe everybody here who has a pet cat is familiar with their shutdown response if they're in an unfamiliar situation. If you take them to the vet, how differently they behave when they do at home. So sometimes you can get a cat that you think is feral, and it actually turns out to be friendly with a period of evaluation to let it calm down, or vice versa. Like I just had a cat recently who I thought was going to be friendly because she was taking food out of my hand, but with weeks of observation, she's actually just not socialized to people, so she's going to have to go into working cat placement. So it's really hard to tell, and cats are not like dogs, and they don't just go up to strangers and show their friendly side. You have to kind of give them time to coax it out and make them feel safe before they'll show you whether they're socialized or not.
Yeah, I'll just add that from the perspective of wildlife too, it actually doesn't matter, whether the cat is a pet cat or a community or feral cat. They're equally devastating for the problem. So I think that's why I've heard this beyond the Bay Area, like the American Bird Conservancy and other folks. It's sort of we're starting to break that down. It's not the silos of the two kinds of cats anymore. It's just all together. Um, great. The next question I think was for Natalie. Are you also working with East Bay SPCA?
We do not work directly with East Bay SPCA. They don't really have like an open shelter, so we pretty much just have partnerships with shelters that can take cats from us because that's the main service that we need from them. But everybody, the whole companion animal ecosystem in the East Bay is very connected. So I'm sure East Bay SPCA has come into play at some point. They might have spayed or neutered cats from the parks before, but they're not one of our major direct partners.
Yeah, great. Okay, so interesting. So this was directed to Natalie, but I'm going to put it to the whole panel. Japan has cat cafes. What are the feasibility of running cat cafes, and then recruiting new volunteers to fundraise or to be part of the solution? I would add to the question.
Well, Kate probably knows more about Cat Town than I do, but there is a cat cafe on Broadway in Oakland. You can go there. I think you have to schedule a time. And you can go and have some snacks and drinks and hang out with cats that are all available for adoption. And we have had park cats that have gone to Cat Town because they're like mostly socialized. They go to Cat Town and can go into pet adoption homes. And I saw somebody ask, when I say working cat, it's really just they're going to an outdoor adoptive placement where they're, like Kate said, they're not a candidate to be an indoor pet. So they're going to an adoptive home, but they're staying outdoors. And we say working cat because those adopters could potentially get services from the cat, which is their why we're all here is they're killing wildlife service, so they can be considered rodent control, but really they're just getting adopted by somebody and staying outside. So yes, there's Cat Town. There's also a cat cafe in San Francisco. We're going to try to continue to communicate about the program for the East Bay Regional Park District as much as we can and point people to our partner organizations, the availability of the application to be a working cat adopter. So yeah, we're trying to get the word out as much as possible.
Would Kate or Tyus, would you want to add to that answer?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of cat cafes. Cat Town is one of Full Circle Cat's partners. We do most of our educational classes there, and we transfer a lot of our cats there as well. But there is Kitty in San Francisco. There is a mini cat town, not related to other cat town in the South Bay. Those are just the ones I know off the top of my head. But cat cafes are really great places for cats that maybe need a little bit of extra socialization before they can be fully adopted. Cat Town has a program called Feral or Fearful, where they take some cats that need a little bit longer to really be evaluated before we can decide if they are really feral and need to go into a working cat program or they can be adopted. And Cat Town has that program, and I know that Full Circle has transferred some cats there before. So has Tiffany with Oakland Animal Services. Cat Town is a wonderful place.
Thank you. I'm gonna start this one off with Tyus then, since so how can we help educate people who are setting out food around the neighborhood or feeding backyard populations of cats?
Yeah, that's a great question. I understand that people's intent is the idea of welfare, or at least at least I would say the consideration of, I think, trying to the aid the welfare of cats. One thing I would say is I think a lot of people approach, I think, feeding cats on the idea that like they're hungry. The literature shows that actually human food supplementation actually doesn't augment, I think, surplus hunting behavior at all. Sonia Hernandez, Mark Wegner actually just asked a question about if there are any studies on cat colony areas. One of my professors at UGA actually published a paper looking at actually behaviors of cat colonies in human food supplementation. And she actually put on video cameras on cats that were actually at colonies and would go back and change out batteries in this collaboration with them. And she found that human food supplementation does not change their hunting behavior at all, like virtually has little effect on them. And they still kill excessively. And I think, if anything, all probably does is give them an energy boost, if anything, which I think is interesting to look at the metabolic dynamics of that. But I think the interesting thing about think about that is I think about a lot of axes of wildlife ecology of not just like how species interact with each other, but also zoonotic disease exchange. And I think about it on like the terms of pathology. It's possible that by also feeding animals, you also could be exposing other cats that are eating from the same place to other diseases that other cats maybe are potentially carrying, and even other animals, right? And I understand that people want to do the right thing and they see a cat, they think that a cat is in need. We have a tendency to care. I think whether it's paternal or maternal instincts or just through general empathy, which I commend people for. But I think it's tricky because sometimes our greatest contributions can come with significant consequences, and we don't know what the long-term fallout of that is. I never want to tell anybody what to do. Me personally, I wouldn't feed cats outdoors or put out a can because, like, if I'm not monitoring it 24/7, then if a raccoon is eating from that and carrying a particular pathogen, and then a cat comes behind it and eats something else, that cat just now contracted something. And then if your cat's roaming outside and then interacts with that other cat, then your cat's bringing back home a disease that you're not even aware of. And then the first thing you do is you take the cat and you shove it in your face. And I just think about all of the disease exchange, especially post COVID-19. I think all of us are a little bit on like, I think a little PTSD from, I think, COVID-19, and realizing like the landscape of public health has changed. And so one of the things that I really talk about a lot is that there's a massive component to public health that people don't think about when it comes to cats, and that cats can be vectors for a myriad of various diseases, lethal or otherwise non-lethal. And I think it's important to think about I think the landscape of that, because it's not just about feeding them, it's also about everything else that they carry with them, and they expose other native wildlife to as well. Yeah, I don't think that there's a perfect solution for it. I think the one thing I would say I would advise on, I would say, if you're leaving out dry food, I would say just supervise. Like, like you say, like, oh, I'm gonna put out some food. If you really feel the need or the compulsion to feed cats, like, I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna stand here for whatever 10 minutes, let whatever cat eats whatever it needs, or whatever the one cat that I feed, and I'm gonna remove the plate. That way, you're somehow removing the potential contaminant or whatever could be contaminated from that like vicinity area. Because I think there has to be some supervision or some control to at least mitigate or reduce potential pathogen exposure to other cats that otherwise wouldn't want to wouldn't get sick otherwise. So
Yeah. And if it's not you feeding them, you could make that suggestion to those who are. But go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
As part of our workshop, our kind of intro to TNR workshop, we do talk about the basics of community cat care, and how to create the best and least destructive feeding stations. And Tyus is completely correct. Uh, do not leave food out unattended. We do not encourage people to trap at night. Trapping at night is a surefire way to get a raccoon or a skunk in a trap. Um, and so really it is best practices in terms of feeding free roaming cats is to feed consistently at the same time every single day, and to put out the food for half an hour. I would say don't stand there because a lot of the cats probably are going to be scared of you, but put the food out. I like to sit in my car, read Reddit, play some games on my phone. 30 minutes later, any food that's not eaten, take it all up, take your plates. Do not place food directly on the ground. That is done a lot. Please bring paper plates when you're feeding cats so you can take all of your trash away with you. And I think that it will do a lot to keep other cats, um, other animals away from that. one thing you will see at very large colonies is a lot of similar diseases. Upper respiratory infections, URIs, are extremely common at community cat colonies, and they can be really devastating to young kittens. Um, and those are spread just rampantly because, again, sharing of the dishes, the cats sleeping with each other, all that kind of stuff. So there is an aspect, that full circle of our classes, that we do talk about best practices for creating feeding stations and maintaining areas.
Great.
And if we have time, I'd like to add to
Yeah.
that too, because this is a really central part of our program, that when we try to just outlaw feeding, which it is against park district policy to allow any feeding in the park district, and you can get a ticket for it. But people who are feeding cats are doing so, as Tyus mentioned, because they have compassion for the cats. They think it's a life or death thing in some instances. So they're not just going to stop. They just hide their feeding or come at hours when people aren't there to see them do it. So we've had actually much more success with just helping those people and bringing them in. Tiffany is like a miracle worker at communicating with people who are feeding, who maybe already had really bad experiences with the park district. And Kate, I'm sure, is also really adept at just kind of starting the conversation with people. And Tiffany and I have worked with people who were feeding cats and they were totally overwhelmed. They had started feeding one or two, kittens were born, they're spending so much money on cat food that they're financially hurting themselves, but they can't stop because they're worried about the cats and they really needed help. And we approached them, started getting their cats fixed, got kittens out and got them adopted, got everything down to a manageable size for this person. And then we know that we're also, just as Kate mentioned, we're sort of doing the best we can to also solve the wildlife problem. There's fewer cats. The cats that are there are going to eventually age out and die. And there's just going to be fewer cats and continuously fewer into the future. So that's just what we've found works best, is working with people, bringing them in to cooperate. There is, like I think both Tyus and Kate said, there's no perfect solution. So we don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we're really just working with what works.
Yeah, thank you all. That's really great. Kate, I think you partially answered this question with like the fact that it's so expensive to neuter. But if you trap a cat that is clearly an owned cat, like has a collar and a name tag or a name tag, you spay or neuter that cat? And then to expand on that, do you know of any laws that speak to like would it be illegal for you to do it if you had the money,
Um, I'm not going to speak to any laws.
Yeah, okay.
I am a
Fair.
librarian. I am not a lawyer, so I'm going to steer clear of that. But I will say, full circle cats. Our policy is, if one of our volunteers traps a cat that is has a collar on it, they are going to immediately let that cat go. It is no reason to hold that cat. What happens a lot is cats. We know cats don't want to wear collars. They need to wear breakaway collars, so if they're outside and they get stuck somewhere, the collar can break away, but those breakaway collars come off pretty easily. And so one thing that does end up happening is we may have a cat that comes to a clinic and it ends up being microchipped. So before a cat is given a vaccination, before a cat is fixed, the clinic will always scan for a microchip. And each clinic has a different policy, kind of exactly what they do. But for the most part, in the Bay Area, all work on the cat stops when you get a microchip. The microchip could be registered or unregistered. There are things that we can do if it's an unregistered microchip, perhaps it was sold to Oakland Animal Services, and we can contact Oakland Animal Services and see if we can find, is this cat a part of their working cat program, or was this a cat that was adopted out that the microchip was never registered? So you can look up information like that. We also are very fortunate with microchips that we have reunited a lot of people with their lost cats. through TNR. And those are always really great stories that we were able to get a lost cat back to its owner through the TNR process. So.
Yeah, that is a really great outcome, actually. Um, okay, so this kind of keeps getting brought up, and this is the tough question, I think, which is what can be done about non-sociable free roaming cats when it comes to preventing them from killing native animals? Or I'm assuming this person is concerned about birds and
Yes.
other animals. Yeah. Um,
So I will say, and I think Tyus kind of touched on it about how supplementing a cat's or feeding a cat is not necessarily going to prevent them from killing wildlife. Cats are unique in that they hunt for fun. That is something, their prey drive is very much a for funsies activity. And so no matter how much you satiate a cat with food, it is still going to hunt. That is just part of its behavior. And so that is where making sure that your cat is fixed so they don't roam as far is going to be important. That is where really we're talking about, or I don't know what you guys are picturing when we're talking about colonies, but colonies don't just exist in one person's backyard. I think the San Leandro Bay Fair project is an example of it. Really did start off with one neighbor calling us about the cats that she was feeding that had scabies and needed help. But through our outreach effort, we were able to target and talk to a lot more people in the neighborhood. And so if you're feeding birds in your neighborhood, you have a bird feeder, or you're seeing a lot of birds in your neighborhood, talk to your neighbors. See who is feeding the cats. See if it is possible to consolidate where those cats are getting fed. People who share fence lines back to back, they both may be feeding cats. The cats are eating at both places. What can you do as a community together to centralize that feeding a little bit more? And number one, get the cats fixed. That is what you have to do. The only way you are going to prevent more cats on the street is by getting them fixed. That is the only way. And so doing that, I always say, lots of my volunteers, you find some food remnants, some bowls, maybe a little cat house, and we don't know who feeds there. Um, just go old school, like write a note, write a little handwritten note. That's what I say. Like, say, hey, are you feeding these cats? Like, I'm a friend of cats. Like, I want to help get these fixed, or give me a call. Here's my email. Here's my Google phone number. Don't use personal number. Um, and see and talk about that. Nextdoor loves their cats, so post on Nextdoor about it, and really try to talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, would anybody like to add to that? That's a big question.
Yeah, I think Kate does a really good job talking about the sensitive reality of like cats are it's not a it's not a perfect solution, and but we have to do the best that we can with I think the resources that we have. I think I want to acknowledge that when we're talking about the politics of, or at least the ecology of cats, I think we're talking also about like two very different scenarios. I think as a biologist who understands the literature deeply on cat ecology, and I think who has seen, I think like what they're capable of. I look at it in two different dimensions of I think like mainland versus island, and in terms of an island ecology system, not negotiable. Like euthanasia and lethal removal is effective, and it shows promising results. The influence that they have on extinction events because of the spatial area and size that likely influences the carrying capacity of a population is that much more of a magnitude of order higher. And in That's one of the reasons where it's two different conversations on a mainland level and across the country of the United States. Cats are here to stay. You could throw millions and millions and millions of dollars of trying to lethally remove cats, and we really wouldn't put a dent into it. Do I think there are circumstances where I think lethal removal is plausible? Absolutely. Do I think that it needs to happen in all circumstances? Not always. I think there's a lot of circumstances where people want to throw lethal removal as an easy band-aid solution when there's a lot of like, it just takes a little bit more effort to maybe to rehabilitate, to get some cats off the street, to get them into some loving homes. I personally, I think I look at it as a situation of like a three-stage solution. I think it needs to be one of education. I think it needs to be policy, and I think it needs to be a combination of TNR and I think and then applications of lethal removal where it needs to happen. Because I think we fully cannot have an effective solution without constructively applying all three at once. Because I think what happens is we take one solution. I think we take one tool and I think we throw it at everything when we're still missing gaps in a lot of other things, whether that's education or whether that's policy, right? Or whether that's just being like, how do we try to combine all three of these? And I think that's one of the biggest things that I noticed, and I've talked to Natalie about this a lot and other people at East Bay Parks, is how do we try to like turn this into a holistic three-part stage process, where I think we can, implement policy and also too, and how we change human behavior as well as a process to education as well. And one of those is like we talk about, like Natalie and I talk about buffer zones. We talk about buffer zones and conservation areas. Like, hey, just letting you know, new ordinance coming up in 2030. Like, if you want to move into an area in this buffer zone, fully welcome to move in the area. Just letting you know, this is the ordinance. It's like, but if your cat is found in this area, it's like, and it will be required by law to have a microchip. Like, that's a fine. Like we told you from the behead, like from the get go, straight up. Like it'd be one thing to just surprise them with like a really expensive fine, but to give people the autonomy to make decisions for themselves and let them know that like this is the policy that we're implementing because we're trying to, we have a duty to our stewardship for native wildlife. I think people, I think, could either respond really aggressively or just be like, oh, okay, like, I just keep my cat inside because I'm not trying to get hit with a $2,000 fine because I want to let my cat outside. Like, and I think there's a lot of ways you can go about it. I'm not saying that's the best solution, but I think it's really complex. And I think Kate does a really good job touching on that. Like, nobody wants to euthanize cats. I think there are some people that maybe probably do get joy out of it, unfortunately. But I think as a whole, we all can agree that nobody really wants to kill cats. Unfortunately, as somebody mentioned in this chat, which was a really good point, the burden of the cruelty in which cats experience is a consequence of our own doing. And I think that's a burden that we think we have to carry for the benefit of, I think, a lot of native wildlife species that suffer as a consequence of human expansion and as a derivation of human colonialism too, which I think is also something we all have to acknowledge as well. Because a lot of cats have been introduced as a consequence to human colonialism. And that's not fair to the indigenous people that reside on those places and the native wildlife species that are also home to those places as well. It's a really tricky conversation that I think about every day. So
Yeah.
I would also just like to add that in terms of sometimes there are cats that do need to be euthanized. I will say the average lifespan of a free roaming cat outside is going to be 2 years. They are going to, we do know that putting a cat back outside, it is not going to have the same quality of life as a cat that is going to be inside. And that is something that, as an advocate of TNR, we just have to accept. I know that there are, many cats that I have returned outside who are no longer living through various means or whatever. But I would like to say that in terms of in the Bay Area, we can't even get our cities to fund spay neuter. We're not going to get them to fund euthanasia. Euthanasia is way more expensive than spay neuter, and so yeah, it's not going to happen. I will say one thing that I am that Full Circle has contacted with a lot is helping in euthanizing free roaming cats. Free roaming cats that are sick, are old. A senior cat that may be able to live inside your house for another good year. That cat's not going to be able to live outside for that long, and so their life is going to be shorter. They are going to be it is more humane to euthanize them sooner. And I do not like getting those calls because it means that I'm going to be on the phone with clinics and shelters throughout the area all day because it is very, very hard to find somebody to euthanize a feral cat for me.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that was a really good joint answer. I think it touched on a lot of the points that were made in the chat as well. I'm sorry, we're like 2 minutes from the end, so we're not going to get to all of the questions. I'm sorry, folks, but this is just the beginning of our conversation, is the way that I see it. And so, if out there in the audience, if you are a GGBA member and you really want to get involved, please email me, because we're kicking this off. We want to find out where we can be most effective and helpful in this space. I'm hearing a lot of potential for advocating with cities and agencies for more resources, which we I think are well positioned for. So if you want to help me with that work, please email me, and I'll put my email in the chat in a second. But I just want to end us with the question that I thought was so wonderful from Wendy about, and I'll kind of rephrase it a little bit, which is just really quickly for each of you, if you had unlimited resources, and we'll just put it to one thing, what is one thing you would like to help solve this problem? We'll start with Natalie, put you on the spot.
That's a good question. I mean, I guess I would say TNR, I mean, sorry, spay neuter services, because if we have unlimited spay neuter, then we can really, I think, make a huge dent in the problem. So, Oakland Animal Services had their budget cut by $1 million a couple years ago, and they were already operating on hardly enough. And somebody mentioned in the chat about we can't even get healthcare for people. But we really should be asking ourselves, we're in one of the wealthiest places in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Where's all our money going? Why can't we solve some of these problems? And we really need to prioritize. This issue is not just a cat issue. It does affect people. So it shouldn't be seen as like, oh, well, cats are, they aren't people, so we shouldn't worry about them. It's all interconnected. We live in the same communities. We affect each other. People are affected by cats and vice versa. So yeah, spay neuter, free and easy access spay neuter for all.
Awesome. Kate or Tyus, do you want to go next?
Sure, I can go. I think Natalie did such a great job. I think we probably all on the same page on that. I think maybe I come at it from a different angle. Like, yeah, I think if I just had unlimited resources, like, yeah, giving every stray cat organization the resources, hospitals, veterinarians, all the resources that they need to properly apply TNR, to the lengths that they really need to, especially like really seeing the lengths of like what a state funded program would be. I also think it'd be really cool to look at it as a trifecta. If I had unlimited resources as an intersection of both like policy and also like how do we also like, I also think of it too as maybe like also like a provision of state provided catios too. That would be super cool. If I had unlimited resources, I'd be like, you want a cat? Cat comes with catio included, like, almost like as if there was like a newborn package. I think Mom Donnie mentioned newborn, like that. Mom Donnie talked about like bassinet like packages for like new parents. I feel like be something like that, like new cat parent catio package included, vaccination shots included, TNR ready to go. This is your fur child for life, protect it, microchip included, like. So I feel like I would do all of that, and I think an additional layer of just like I think more research and more funding and research, because I think obviously as many people are aware of this current, I think political climate, I think we obviously could use significantly more investment, I think, in natural resources. I think it'd be nice to really understand more on like what is effective when it comes to non-native invasive species management and like what really isn't. And it's just like it's a really expensive field to invest in. The USDA often tends to fund a lot of those things, but if I had unlimited resources, I think I like to see a lot of that. I think there's still so much to know about cat ecology and their behavior, and like what they respond to. As somebody mentioned, somebody said something in there. They're like, I tried to use I tried to use a sonic sound repellent and it didn't work. They're like, what works? And it's just like that would be cool. More funding and research. Like, what are non-lethal deterrents that are effective against cats when it comes to people trying to preserve native wildlife or songbirds in their homes, like or around their homes. And it's like just that's a perfect example. Like, what is like, do we have the money to do experimental trials? So I think it'd be like that. Yeah, science, community cat welfare, and I think also like policy, I think too, and like maybe legislation, because that also costs money, a lot of money.
Awesome. And then Kate would finish.
So Natalie's spending her money on TNR spay neuter. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna spend my money on owned animal spay neuter because really the free roaming cats that are outside are they're not generations and generations and generations of feral cats. They are cats that were their owners were evicted or the male cat was spraying, and so they put the cat outside. And so, really, if we can make spay neuter more affordable or free for our owned animals, we're going to see the number of free roaming cats outside drop significantly. And so, that is where we need to start. If we think about the work that we can do as a pyramid, the base of it really should be getting owned animals, cats and dogs, but in the same cats, getting owned animals fixed so they are not contributing to the problem. And then from there, we can talk about TNR, foster adoption, and relocation.
Yeah, great. Again, I just want to say thank you all so much. Thank you to our audience. Glenn, I think you're coming off screen here to do the send off, but
Yes.
so grateful.
Thank you all for joining us tonight and for sticking with us. We did go a little long, but it was fascinating. I felt like I learned something new today. So that's any day that I learn something new is a good day. So thank you all, and we look forward to future working. We are the Golden Gate Bird Alliance. We chose that word alliance for a reason because we like to work together with other organizations to solve problems. And I'm really thrilled to see that we are starting some of this. This is probably the most challenging work we will do. And I'm thrilled that we are making a start on this. So thank you all for your support.